Hello, Gaston County. Welcome to episode number 69 of Gaston's Great, a podcast highlighting some of the great things happening in and around Gaston County. I'm your host, Stephen Long, as we come to you once again from the international headquarters of GSM Services, and as we look forward to having some great discussions in the coming weeks and months. We seem to believe in discussing more of the reasons why Gaston's great. We are highlighting another great organization this week and have Chad Sakada with us. Chad is the area director for Gaston County Young Life. Chad, it's great to have you on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm excited to be here.
Very good. So we're going to, like usual, get right to it. So, Chad, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself, anything you'd like to share.
Yeah. Like I said, name's Chad Sakada. Have a wife and 3 kids. Just had a daughter about a month ago.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, we got two little boys and then now a little girl. And so we're very excited. And then,
what's the age range?
So the
1 month to
1 month up to 6 years.
Okay.
On Friday is his birthday.
All right.
So
very good. That's a lot packed into 6 years there.
Yes. Well, and the first 2 were only 17 months apart, so that was a little crazy for a little while. Still is, but it's
good
great.
For you.
Yeah. My wife and I we moved to Gaston County about 5 years ago, and so we live over in Belmont currently, but initially moved to Christmastown, USA.
Cadville, okay.
Navigated all the craziness of the holidays, which was not that bad. That's everybody always asks me, like when they find out we lived in McAdenville, they're always, hey, how was it? Was it just
it's insane for that 1 month?
Crazy. And you're like, actually, no. We got these cool little stickers and, get in and out back ways. And
oh, that's good.
It wasn't bad. No, we loved it. So it's been a joy. So, yeah.
Well, very good. So, listen, I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, it's nice to hear a little bit about our guests. So, for our listeners who might not be familiar, I'm a little familiar personally with the organization, but what can you tell us about Young Life, about the organization, what the mission is, your role, and then maybe even how you ended up involved with Young Life?
Yeah, and so the mission statement for Young Life is just that it's introducing adolescents to Jesus Christ and helping them grow in their faith, which obviously can be a pretty vague statement also. And so to kind of walk that out a little bit, it's really, I think I've been involved since I was in high school. And so I got involved coming to what we call club and campaigners and our summer and weekend camps and whatnot. But, and then have been involved ever since, really. But what I've found is that it feels like it's one of the best avenues for sharing Christ with the next generation. Okay. That I've found, and so it's been a joy. So I've been involved for over, if you count high school, over 20 years, which dates myself a little bit. Yep. Goes by fast. That's right. You don't have to be young, to be involved in Young Life on some levels, but yeah. So it's just an avenue for sharing Christ with adolescents, middle school and high school. There is Young Life College. We don't have it here in Gaston County, but there's places, bigger universities that have it. But really, we seek to seek out kids that are far from Christ, kids that would never step in a church. Kind of was the initial kind of mission statement and vision of it when it started back in 1941 of the founder, Jim Rayburn, and his mentor. They kind of realized, hey, there are not high school kids walking through the doors of the churches, and so instead of just
and that was, you said 1941.
1941, yes, sir, yeah. And so they said, let's go to them and go build relationships with them on their turf, on their terms, and along the way share Jesus with them. And so it's very super relational, super intentional, and so I love those pieces of it and getting to do that.
So how would you describe your role? I mean, area director. So what does that entail? What's the day in the life of the area director for Young Life?
Well, some friends and family members around me like to joke that it's meeting life is what my job is, but no, it is a lot of those. It's a lot of one-on-one meetings, small group meetings, whether that's with students, with some of our volunteers, with people in the community, whether that's churches or business leaders and things like that, individuals, parents, to, whether it's raising awareness or raising funds. My job is basically to set up the ministry, oversee and set up the ministry so that it can be executed by our great group of volunteers that we have that are involved. And so, day in the life, it really is. It's a couple meetings a day.
Okay.
It's doing some of that stuff, but then, but certainly it's also for me getting out to the high school. I do my direct ministry work at South Point.
Okay.
We have ministry also at Forest View, and then we have what's called Wildlife, which is our middle school ministry. And so here we do it as kind of a county-wide one. A lot of kids that come from Belmont Middle, a lot of kids that come from from Cramerton. We've got some kids coming from Gaston Christian and Holbrook and Gaston Day as well, which is really fun to the Wildlife, the middle school piece. But for me, it's meetings, it's doing what I can to set up the ministry so we can keep doing it, and then going to the high school and being with high school guys and getting to know them.
So how did you end up getting involved with Young Life yourself? I heard you say, was that back in high school when you first were exposed to it?
Yeah, back in high school, I was a sophomore in high school, and some friends, they just invited me. They kept inviting me to Club, which is kind of our larger outreach, kind of crazier weekly meeting, songs, games, skits, but everything that kind of funnels down so that kids are ready to hear the gospel at the end of the night. And so they kept inviting me that. I mean, just hounded me. And eventually I finally came after probably a year and a half of them inviting me. And kind
of like being EH at F3, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
Takes a while.
Takes a while. You got to break them down a little bit,
That's right.
Man, I went and I walked in a room that was actually an all-city club, and so there was probably 500 high school kids there from a bunch of different high schools. And you walk in a situation like that, and your doors just get blown off, and you're going, I don't know what this is. This is wild, but I think I want to keep doing this for forever, And so that's kind of how I got involved with side friends.
Well, my daughter is an 11th grader at Forest View, and she's been to several events. She has some friends that are involved, between our own church and soccer, cross country. There's some conflicts occasionally,
Sure.
but she has made it and has enjoyed it very much. And I mentioned back in the dark ages, there was some Young Life was active back in the late 80s when I was in high school, and I even attended a few events way back in the day. So
that's wonderful.
So you've mentioned a couple of things called, you said club, but kind of what are some of the specific initiatives? I'm not sure if that's the best word for it, but initiatives or programs or kind of things that you are doing month to month to get these kids involved, and what are the actual events and things like that. Just some of the initiative you guys are doing here locally.
Well, one of the main tools that Young Life has is, like I said, is relationship building. It's literally just going to go be a friend to a high school or middle school student. Whether that's serving in a certain way, we've got high school coaches, people that are coaching soccer or wrestling or various things like that, or it's going to help tutor or things, or help, with an arts program or whatnot. Okay. And so it's called contact work, but really it's just going and being a friend. Showing up, like I said, on their turf. And so that's kind of ongoing. That's probably one of the most crucial pieces of it is, hey, we know that, kids they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right?
Right.
And hear that all the time, I'm sure, but it especially rings true in what we get to do. But then on a week-to-week basis, we do, like I said, club or other kind of larger scale events, outreach events. But then we also do something called campaigners, which is a takeoff of the original name of Young Life, which was the Young Life campaign. So campaigners are merely just kids that are wanting to know a little bit more. The club talk at the end of club is like 15 minutes of diving into scripture and how does this apply to you and your world and your life. And then we say, hey, but if you want to know more, if you want to keep growing in this and talk about it more than just the 15 minutes that you have at the end of club, come to campaigners. And where we'll dive deeper, we'll dive into scripture a little bit more. They'll get a chance to actually kind of digest it and ask questions and really work it out and work out their faith. And then we'll do, we have leaders that do kind of small group discipleship, mentoring meetings once a week, once every other week, things like that with
Are those students or those adult leaders?
Yeah. So we're all based on, caring adults is what something we say. So whether that adult is a 20-year-old college sophomore, which we've got one of those a guy that is a student at Belmont Abbey, and he's one of our wildlife leaders, and those middle school boys adore him.
Okay.
But all the way up to I've led Young Life with a guy who is an 80-year-old retired pediatrician, and he was a volunteer leader. On his lunch breaks, he would leave the office, go to the high school, go to the lunchroom, hang out with high school kids. And then when he finished his job, he'd go run with the cross country team. Even until he was 80 years old,
wow.
He would do all those things.
That's interesting.
So yeah, you really, it's not just young.
Sure. Yeah, I guess Young Life is about who you are serving,
right?
Not so much about who might be involved on the leadership side.
Yeah.
So looking back on your time here, with Young Life, and can you think of some specific examples of some successes, or looking back on a group, or maybe a kid, somebody, a young adult that you really impacted, or you saw something, that you can, maybe a story or some anecdotal story or something you can share with our listeners that might kind of give some insight into, the impact you guys might be making?
Yeah.
There's probably more than one, I'm sure.
It's hard to boil that down to just picking one. Because it really is, it's a joy. I feel like we just get to sit on the front row to what God is doing in the lives of high school and middle school kids. But one thing, so we just had our big fundraising banquet last week, and one of our students, actually from Forest View, a girl named Lillian, got up to share, and she's been involved since she was a freshman, and she's a senior now. Really learned how to follow Christ and have a relationship with Christ through Young Life and through her relationship with her Young Life leader, who has a full-time job, is married herself, and has friends her own age, but also chooses then in her spare time to go care about high school girls. But Lillian really shared how it had really impacted how she, like I said, how she had her relationship with Jesus and what that looked like on a day-to-day basis. And now she's actually one of our student leaders for wildlife. So she's involved in her own ministry at Forest View, but then she goes and serves and cares for middle school students herself, and kind of gets to pass that along. And so to hear her talk about that, I hadn't even heard the full story till right before the banquet. Okay. And then she got up and shared it in front of 200 people, at a big fundraising event, and blew everybody away, and it just was really special to hear that. So I feel like there's countless stories of that. We've got different guys and girls that have done that through the years, whether that's here or other places that I've been. And just watching them mature in how they process Scripture, how they process Jesus and what he means now, realizing like, hey, it's not just, 2,000 years ago, but it's now, it's in my life. It matters for the rest of my life. And how can I impact others around me then? Right. Kind of once I reach that maturity. And so that's been something that's been really fun. I'd say, like even in the past, so we've been here for 5 years, and obviously, COVID puts a weird halt on a lot of things, especially relationally.
Right. Face-to-face stuff.
Face-to-face makes it very difficult.
Right.
But man, we were really blessed even during that time to see not just the width of ministry grow, but really the depth, and to see a lot of kids really start to figure out. And I think that probably accelerated in many ways the questions that kids are asking about life and the world around them, and where is their place in it all, and what does it look like after this life, and things like that. And so I think for kids to really process that because of COVID and that time, and maybe because they had more time to think, or but there was a lot of incredible growth that we got to see.
Are you pretty much back to a normal routine like pre-COVID, or
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay,
which
has
been
good.
Which has been good.
I hope so.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I think we really are. I think I could say we're 100% back to normal.
What about participation? Is that same, better? Is it?
Yeah.
To your point about kids asking more questions, do you find more kids, young adults, looking for something like Young Life since COVID, or is that a dumb question?
No, that's a great question. I think we have seen some shifts in adolescence, and I think it's the same as shifts that we've seen across the greater population, whatever age you are. But I would say, COVID and kind of quarantine and like I'm caring for you because I might not feel super well. But I think there's some parts in there where it almost gave some kids an excuse to not be as social. Like they became more dependent on screens. Right. Whether because of, distance learning or just social media and, things that you can do on your phone, they became more kind of detached in some ways. So there are some kids that are searching more, but then there's a lot of kids that we're having a harder time connecting with because it almost gave them an excuse to not leave their house.
Yeah, I think that's a good phrase. I think we've used it around here too, is COVID? COVID was the great excuse for so many things. Mm-hmm. And some of those things have come back, but some haven't. I mean, I'm trying to take an example of me personally, maybe even, frankly, even virtual church. Mm-hmm. I mean, our church that I attend, we're back to normal offerings, but we still have a higher percentage than obviously before COVID that are still, doing virtual church as an example. So that's just something that comes to mind. And then the fact that we're even here, we're still having some virtual type meetings and some of our vendors. I mean, just so there's interaction. Some of that hasn't changed. Some of it's changed, but some of it, is still the same that it was back in November of 2020 or whatever. So, So I was just curious as to that. You're looking back on your time again, a similar question, but is there something that you think of that you're most proud of accomplishing in your time here with Gaston County Young Life, something specific?
I think, I'm always quick to point back to, hey, it's not me, that's doing the work, that's making things happen. But something that when we moved here, one of the reasons that we were asked to consider moving to Gaston County and being the air director here was just there had been some really great work done for some time, almost a decade. And Young Life here in Gaston County has kind of stopped and started over the years, even, like you're saying, back to when you were in high school. I think even between then and now, there was probably 3, I would say, hard stops where there was no Young Life ministry happening at all between then and now. And so we're currently in a run of about 15 years of it growing and going strong, which is great. So when we moved here, there was a pretty decent foundation. But one of the things that we were asked to grow was a lot of the kind of community adult relationships, the buy-in from just the greater community. Young Life, when it comes to funding and things like that, I mean, everything is community-based. And so it's not, we do have we're an international organization, every state, over 100 countries, that sort of thing. But all of those are funded individually by the local community.
Gotcha.
And so I do personal support raising, but then the area comes up with the rest. And so really being able to say, hey, how can we grow the ownership of the community of Gaston County in Young Life here? And so that's something that I think we've been able to do really well, even despite, like I said, a year and a half of things looking different. We've really been able to increase some things. And that's been really fun to see. So
I appreciate you sharing that. And my wife and I attended, I guess the big banquet, gosh, it's been a few years ago. I wish I could remember what year it was, but I remember just being, I don't know if I was surprised was the right word, just the attendance, the number of people that were there. It was at a church on Union Road. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to remember the name of the church. They're on the right.
I think it's Union Road Church.
It might be, yeah. Seems like it may have been changed, the name, a couple of times. But again, I do remember just being, being a little surprised at the number of people that were there in attendance. I mean, it was a full house. So that was actually good to see, under the circumstances. That was pre-COVID. So, Chad, looking ahead, what do you see? That's standard question everybody asks, right? 5 to 10 years down the road. You don't have to go 5 to 10 years down the road, but looking ahead, the future of Young Life here in Gaston County, what do you see? Are there any big plans, things that you got on tab, anything you can share, or just, what is your vision for what Young Life might look like in the future?
Well, I had a supervisor, a former supervisor that would ask me probably every 6 months or so, and just kind of to keep it fresh on my mind, he would always ask, hey, what is a fully realized Gaston County Young Life?
Okay.
And
that's a great way to put that.
Yeah. And I thought it was it always resonated with me. So I, spent some time praying over it, thinking about it, processing with our board members and other, kind of important people. And I think somewhere in that 5 to 10 years, based on what we've been able to do so far, a fully realized Gaston County would probably be 4 to 5 full-time staff members. So currently I'm the only full-time. We have 2 part-time staff members as well.
Okay.
But to have 4 to 5 full-time staff members, and one thing that we've realized is, obviously wanting to have those people in geographically strategic locations, right? And Gaston County is great, and man, we have really, really enjoyed living here, working here, being a part of the community. But one of the things that I've noticed, and I think other people, is that there are weirdly some interesting, cultural doesn't feel like the right word, but like kind of dividing lines.
Yeah.
In terms of
all the different municipalities we have.
Right. Yeah, we have so many different little towns that are all mill towns and all that, and there's just not a lot of overlap in some places. And so, I think it would be having, we would need a staff person in kind of the Belmont Cramerton piece. We need a staff person 1 to 2 north of 85. And then we would need probably 2 within the kind of Gastonia, South Gastonia, all the way over towards, Crowders Mountain, Bessemer City, all that. And so, but kind of within that too, the fun thing that I love about Young Life, and I think 2 areas that we could really grow our service in, is Young Life has Capernaum, which is ministry to those with special needs, whether physical or mental.
Okay.
And so we don't currently have that here, and I think, man, that would be incredible, just as you're thinking about the kingdom and how can you serve every kid. Those are often kids that get marginalized and are not, served or noticed as much, as a fully abled kid. And so that'd be one. And then the other really marginalized population a lot of times is teen moms. And Young Life has a program called Young Lives, and it's to serve teen mothers and their babies. And so we've started to have some people ask some questions around that one, which is really fun to say, hey, maybe that is something that the Lord is stirring in our area, and that gosh, we could really, I know there's obviously great organizations that are serving both of those populations,
right?
But certainly there's another, an avenue for even more.
How does Young Life get connected to schools? You've mentioned South Point, Forest View, Cramerton Middle, Belmont Middle, Holbrook. I mean, how does it? What occurs that you come connected with a specific school?
Yeah, most of the time it's word of mouth.
Okay.
Whether that's student to student or parent to parent, or even teacher to teacher, or whatever it might be, that they say, hey, they'll see something happening, at a different school, or they'll hear about Young Life and they'll say, gosh, wouldn't it be great if we had this at our school? And so they, a lot of times we'll kind of rally parents together, parents, administrators, teachers, things like that, to say, hey, we need to figure out, like, can we have Young Life at our school? Because we see the impact it's making at, this school over here. So how do we get it to our community? And so that's kind of where we step in. Because again, being fully community supported in all areas, we want to make sure that we're not just kind of bulldozing in.
Oh,
saying,
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good point. Absolutely.
We will do ministry.
It needs to be viable, right? You got to have a viable
exactly
leadership, and things just don't just happen because somebody on a podcast asked a question. Right.
Hey, maybe they will,
Well, again, I will circle back to make sure when we finish. That's maybe a question I'll get back, is obviously how to get in touch with you guys, and where local parents and young adults can find information out about. But before we kind of go down that route, this is a podcast about Gaston County, the great things happening. Kind of maybe in your own words, why is Gaston County better, Chad? Because Gaston County Young Life is here.
Well, I would say it's the same reason that I think any town or county is better with Young Life in it. And obviously I'm a bit of a, homer in that.
Absolutely,
but
you should be.
I should be. That's right.
Okay.
But I just think anything that is going to continue to grow the opportunities for the next generation to be impacted by the gospel and by Scripture and by Jesus, I'm a big believer in it takes a village, to raise a child, and hopefully if certain churches are reaching, kids in their population, and then you've got, countless other ministries that are doing the same thing. Gosh, I mean, the dream would be that every middle school and high school kid that walked through the halls of any middle school or high school here in Gaston County would have a chance to hear the gospel and respond, whether that's through Young Life or through a church or through, FCA or Crew or whatever else, right? That any of those things, and again, I know there's a ton of other ones that I've, haven't even named, but that between all of us, if we could reach every kid, that would be the dream. And so I think anything that increases that, and especially in our county,
sure,
that makes it better.
Yeah, I think something you said right when we started, not long after we started, I was getting ready to make a comment, but then we moved on. But these young adults, I think two things. I think first, if any type of young adult can have some positive influence from somebody that's not their parents, it's something good. I mean, obviously the parents are going to be the biggest influence on their lives. But, I remember when I was a teenager, and I've had two teenagers and have a third that is currently a teenager. Sometimes they might take advice from a outside adult before they might take the advice from their parents. Would you know about that, Naomi? Yeah. So, and then secondly, I think young adults, when I was that age, I didn't realize the impact my actions, my words, how I lived had on others around me. As an adult, I've become into terms with that.
Sure.
And I think that may be the biggest thing when my wife and I had children, we were like, oh my, they are paying attention, right? So we better get our act together, because they're paying attention more to what we're doing and maybe what we're saying. So I think those two things, Young Life, to your point about youth directors at churches, we had FCA on an earlier episode, and so those are opportunities where you can really make a big impact on our local youth, and of course I'm a Christian as well, so that would be something that I would consider a positive. So, Chad, before we kind of move on to some other questions, anything I haven't asked that I should have asked? Anything you'd like to share about Gaston County Young Life before we kind of shift gears just briefly?
And one thing that I do think is that we've made a big push for here that, I'm not sure that that this happens necessarily as intentionally across the board, although it is a goal, I think, for everybody in Young Life. But we've really made an intentional push here thanks to, just my background. I grew up in church and then started going to Young Life, so I kind of did a little bit backwards.
Gotcha.
But because of that background and kind of some of the passions of some of our board members, that we've really also want to make sure that we're doing a great job just partnering just in relationship with churches.
Okay.
And so it's one of the things where I go, gosh, I want every church to know, hey, we're not in competition. We're on the same team. We've got the same goals, and it takes, like I said, it takes all of us to keep pushing that ball down the field, so to speak, and to realize, hey, how can we best support a kid? Because we know that Young Life won't always necessarily be there, right? Like you graduate from high school, and you go to a college that has Young Life College. Once you graduate from high school, the way to be involved is to be a volunteer leader, and that isn't for everybody, and that's okay. But we know that the church is going to be there. A church is going to be there, and so if they can have also a great relationship with churches, and that we can say, hey, let me get you used to going to church and build a habit and know how to get involved and know how to be poured into at a church. Gosh, that's the dream. And then we'll just keep running back into the forest to get more kids.
Good.
So that's one thing that I really always want to make sure that people know. Okay. Is like, hey, we're we've got the same goals.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you might have churches or groups that view that as competition, so to speak, for the youth. So, but, I don't think that's been an issue. Again, I've just met so many people and kids that are involved in Young Life. And again, it was a couple friends that got, my daughter, to come to some events too. So that's been a positive experience. So I appreciate you sharing that. So we're going to shift gears real quick. And we have a few Gaston County related questions I would like to ask. And these are really the more important questions of the day. And this is really what your friends, your family, the youth that you're involved with, your F3 brothers, this is what they really want to know about you. And we're going to call this let's be boring, the Young Life edition of Gaston County questions. Is that not very creative, was it, Naomi? All right, Chad, first question. You've been here long enough to answer these questions here in Gaston County. So favorite Tony's ice cream flavor?
It's got to be like cookies and cream.
Okay, cookies and cream. Is that approved, Naomi? Mm-hmm.
I know grape is, big. I'm not a big grape anywhere. So it's not something personal.
Well,
Tony's.
Grape has been a relatively common answer, but one you can give Sargento a hard time when he was on with our Rotary Club. He said lemon.
That's not an ice cream flavor.
So obviously, yeah. Actually, there was a time after that episode that I brought that up on purpose to give Sargento a hard time. That's Vinny Cherry, if anybody out there wants to know.
That's like a sorbet.
So it's been a while. It's
not an ice cream flavor.
Yeah, but grape is surprisingly good. Lemon was okay, but grape was actually better. But cookies and cream, I'm with you. Sundrop or Cheerwine?
Cheerwine, better if it's a float too.
Very good. Favorite local restaurant?
It's got to be the Station for us.
Oh,
in Belmont.
Station's great in Belmont. Local F3 hangout as well.
It is. That helps.
Favorite outdoor activity in Gaston County, or favorite park, or?
Oh man. So like I said, we used to live in McAdenville. We had a great greenway that kind of went behind our neighborhood over there, and we just love like any of those trails that are around, whether it's around Goat Island or McAdenville. I mean, any of the trails. We just go with the boys. They hop on their bikes and they ride up and down, and
very good.
We walk. But park. I was talking about this with my wife, and she's the best. But she said, it really depends on what time of year is it as to which park is the best one. Like if it's blazing hot summer, past 9 a.m., you're not going over to Stowe Park. If you have little kids, right, you're going to Davis Park because it's shaded.
Yeah, that's a good
right?
point. Yep.
Like if it's nice weather, you can go to Goat Island. So you gotta figure out what time of year it is and how hot you want to be.
So it depends.
At that park, right? It depends.
Okay.
Yeah, it changes.
So here's the question, the most important question of the entire podcast recording: UNC Duke or NC State?
I spent the most amount of time prepping for this question, and I don't think I have a good answer. Full disclosure, I grew up in Ohio.
Okay.
Grew up in Dayton.
We won't hold that against you.
Thank you. I did go to Ohio State, so you may hold that against me.
The Ohio State, yeah.
Well, I only said Ohio State.
Okay.
I try not to be, too obnoxious about it. So I'm a Buckeye, and my wife went to Clemson, and so we don't necessarily have a super vested interest in the Big Three in North Carolina.
So NC State's the answer.
But I would say NC. If we had to pick it, I'd say NC State in football. We would pull for them because we kind of cheer for red teams.
Okay,
it's a bit of a theme in our family, reddish teams. And then, but in college basketball, we'd probably have to go with Duke.
Give me some. Thank you. Thank you.
That's the sound effect I've always wanted in my life.
Oh boy. Moving on.
You can read between the lines is the one I didn't say.
So Chad, what is something, thank you. Yeah. What is something very few people know about you?
Honestly, Stephen, I'm a pretty open book. So it's that was a funny question to think about. I think a lot of people probably don't know that I really do love to go shoot shotguns, which is buckshot. So Buckeye and all that. I feel like I'm actually pretty good at it.
Oh, well, good.
But I don't know.
That's a first. I don't think we've had that as an answer. So,
I think if you just looked at me, you wouldn't be like,
acceptable answer.
That guy loves to go to like a sporting clay or trap shoot or something. And
hey, we don't judge here.
I love it.
How about a book or blog or article or something, excuse me, you could recommend for our readers, something recent or?
Yeah. So there's a new book. I think it came out this past spring, actually. It's by a guy named John Tyson, who is a pastor, and it's called The Intentional Father. And so I've been working through this book, and it's, you would look at it and you go, oh, that's a small book. I could probably read that in, 2 or 3 sittings. It is one of those ones where you read a chapter, and then he actually has kind of action steps at the end of every chapter.
Okay.
Things to think about, just as you're raising sons. And so it's been incredible. So I'm reading through it now with the plan. One of the things that you're supposed to do is then build a cohort of other dads with you, and to kind of go through it. And, hopefully your sons are the same age or right around the same age. And so you kind of lead them through this process of becoming a man.
That sounds like a good shield lock activity.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. It definitely would be. So that's been really good.
Okay. I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. When my kids were younger, I did try to read some things. Of course, now my kids are older. It's too late for me to fix any of my screw ups with them. So listen, Chad, I appreciate you kind of indulging us on those Gaston County questions. We just like to get off track there a little bit, but we've got a couple more questions and we'll get finished up here. So besides Gaston County Young Life, now that you had several years in Gaston County, besides Young Life, why is Gaston County such a great place?
Oh man, gosh, for me, I go, you've got everything that you could want, I think, within your fingertips, within your reach, right? Whether that's great restaurants or great things to do, being outside, you can be hiking a mountain, hike Crowders in the morning, and then you can be out on the lake, 2 hours later and spend the rest of the day there. And, but plenty of hiking, plenty of, coffee shops, great shopping, all that. But then, I think we love the pace of life here is wonderful. And my wife and I both lived in Charlotte at times, and so and Charlotte's good. It's a fun city. There's obviously a lot of things to do.
It's close enough.
It's close enough. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you can come home and sleep in your own bed and not have to be in all the craziness of
I agree.
Traffic or whatever. And
I appreciate that. I do. It's a unique county and where it's located and the amenities that we have, and you nailed it. You described it very well.
I'm partial, but I would say that we're better than all the other surrounding counties and towns.
No question at all.
Not to dog on them too much, but.
And this is maybe the about 9th or 10th time I've said this phrase in one of our podcast episodes, but Charlotte is the gateway to Gastonia, so we've got that going.
I almost wore that shirt today.
You know what? I do have that shirt that when we had the travel and tourism group on, they brought us some shirts that had that exact on there. So, I love this question as well, Chad. So kind of looking back, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Oof. What advice would I give my 20-year-old self? Gosh, I think one of the biggest things I would probably tell 20-year-old Chad Sakada is, man, everything is a season, and not everything is as great and long lasting, or as dire and long lasting as you might think it is at a 20 years old, and so
this too shall pass.
Yes,
good and bad, right?
Good and bad, absolutely. That's 100% is, and I think that's probably one of the things that I would tell him, and hey, just. Don't. I'm sure saying things like "don't get distracted," kind of keep your eyes focused on where they need to be, will be part of it. But yeah,
it's easy. My 20-year-old self was just the smallest things were disasters, right?
Right.
Looking back, it's humorous to think about that now. The things I thought were really important and disasters really were not anything I should have been worried about. To your point, especially thinking that something small was going to last forever, and pass pretty quick. Yeah. So Chad, listen, I appreciate this. This has really been good. It's great to hear about what the work you guys are doing here, and you personally, and with the group Young Life. So again, the main point here is to bring awareness to your organization. How can people get involved? Donations. So, how can people get involved? So maybe there's a child or a parent at another high school in Gaston County. Just how can they find out more information? Get in touch with you guys. Just can you share anything about that?
Yeah. So, and even a little bit to that, I would say like we at our banquet last week, like I said, we really challenge people to do one of two things, and it's either to go with us, or it's to send us in our going. And so that can look like a couple different things, but, going, obviously, hey, can you jump on board and be either a volunteer leader? Can you serve on our local board? Can you serve on, various different things? And then, or can you send? And sending can be, connecting us to people with, whatever resources, or can you give financially? So kind of the answer to get connected on those things, you can go to GastonCounty.YoungLife.org.
Okay.
Is our website. Try to keep it as simple as possible. And but also you can find us on Instagram or Facebook, just really Gaston County Young Life, or Gaston County Wildlife.
Okay.
Also is, like I said, is the middle school one. And you can shoot us a message on there, and we respond pretty quickly to that. So,
all right, very good.
Yeah.
Any other last words or wisdom or anything you'd like to share before we close this episode out?
I think we nailed it all.
No, I think you did a great job. You did a great job sharing all that. So again, listeners out there, you heard about Gaston County Young Life and the good work they're doing. So if you have the inclination to get involved or help the organization anyway, please check out the website and the social media and reach out to them. I'm sure it'll be worth your while and worth your time. And as usual, I'm going to finish up this episode with my own book or podcast recommendation. I'm doing a podcast recommendation this week. It's one I listen to fairly regularly. It's called American History Tellers, and it's hosted by a gentleman named Lindsey Graham, not the Senator Lindsey Graham, but it's been around long enough that you can find an episode pretty much on about any historical event or anything you want to find out about. And my quote or thought of this week comes from a gentleman named Robert Clancy, and I would kind of categorize it maybe about staying strong, moving forward, that type of thought. And he said, "The hardiest plants survive because they weather the storms and never stop reaching for the light." So maybe kind of going back to that 20-year-old question, some of those things we thought were such a big deal, maybe they're not, but we are going to have storms that we're going to have to weather in our lives. And we've all kind of weathered one the last 2.5 years or so together. And hopefully you were able to see that there is maybe some light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully things are getting back to whatever the new normal is, and we're getting through all that. So again, I appreciate you allowing me to share another thought for this week. So to our listeners out there, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode. Please continue to spread the word if you can about the podcast, and please don't hesitate to contact us here at our email, which is podcast@gastonsgreat.com. We're always looking for suggestions for future podcast topics and guests. You can find the podcast and subscribe at the website or anywhere you listen to podcasts. And also, please follow us on all our social media platforms. And to give us a good 5-star rating, apparently that helps us get noticed as well. Thanks again to Chad for being our guest today. Gaston's Great is produced and brought to you by Naomi Hunt and Amy Anderson from GSM Services, and edited here locally by the Sumner Group. I'm your host, Stephen Long. Thanks again for hanging out with us, and please keep coming back to hear more reasons why Gaston's great.